It looked like almost feral animals. It was terrible.
16 children, a filthy house, and a secret investigation. We're learning more about the Siders family.
16 children, one house, and a silence that lasted for years. That's the number that stopped an entire county in its tracks last week. 16 kids, ranging from a year and a half old all the way up to 18, found living in conditions that investigators are calling filthy. And look, when you hear the details of this one, you're going to understand why people all over Ohio are asking the same question right now. How does something like this go on for so long, right under everyone's nose? Here's the thing, though. This isn't some isolated, one-off tragedy. This is a story about a family, a system, and a whole lot of people who say they knew something was wrong. Not one person. Not two people. Multiple family members are now coming forward, and what they're saying is raising more questions than answers. So let's start at the beginning, because you need the full picture before you can understand how deep this goes. Sheriff's deputies and state agents went into a home in rural Ohio to execute a search warrant.
It's been nearly a week since sheriff's deputies and state agents went into a home in rural Ohio to execute a search warrant and found 16 children in a room that was described as filthy. Those 16 children are the daughters and sons of Gary Lee Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders. They are facing 16 counts of child endangering, and Gary Jr.'s parents, Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders, are facing the same charges. The state's attorney general, the Vinton County prosecutor, and the sheriff described the conditions in the home as filthy, with feces and bugs in the 12 by 12 room where they say these children were kept.
What they say they found inside was 16 children, all belonging to Gary Lee Siders Jr. and Elizabeth Siders, living in a 12 by 12 room.
The children range in age from 1.5 to 18. 2 were taken to level 1 trauma centers. The others were treated and released from a number of hospitals and then placed in foster homes. The home on Omer Street is roped off by crime scene tape to keep people out.
Investigators described feces and bugs in that space. They said some of the children couldn't even speak. The sheriff went as far as to say the conditions looked almost feral. Now I need you to stay with me here, because this is where it gets complicated fast. 4 adults are facing charges in this case.
All 4 Siders face second-degree felony child endangering charges, including the grandparents, Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders. They've pleaded not guilty to the charges. When the arrests were made last week, law enforcement said the children hadn't been to school and couldn't read or write. The oldest couldn't spell her name, but one of Elizabeth Siders' brothers is disputing that his oldest nieces are illiterate, even posting screen grabs from social media accounts attributed to them.
Not just the parents. The grandparents, too, Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders, the paternal grandparents, are facing the exact same second-degree felony child endangering charges as their son and daughter-in-law. All 4 of them have pleaded not guilty, and that detail matters, because this isn't a case where guilt has been decided. Not yet. These are charges, serious ones. But charges all the same, and every one of these 4 people is entitled to their day in court, just like anyone else would be. But here's what nobody's really talking about: the timeline behind how this family came to be. Court records from Mason County, West Virginia, show that Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Russell got married back in March of 2008.
The sheriff says there were 16 children in that house. Records from Mason County, West Virginia, show that Gary Jr. and Elizabeth Russell were married on March 31st, 2008. Court documents show the couple had a child a short time later on May 30th, 2008. Now, you might be wondering, why would Elizabeth and Gary Jr. go to West Virginia to get married? Well, in Ohio, you have to be 18 to get married. You can be 17, but you have to have parental consent and then meet a bunch of other strict guidelines, jump through a lot of hoops.
Elizabeth was 15 years old. 15. And the reason they crossed state lines to do it, well, Ohio requires you to be 18 to marry, or 17 with parental consent, and a long list of legal hoops. West Virginia at the time didn't have those same guardrails. A short time later, in May of 2008, the couple had their first child.
Elizabeth Siders was 15 when she married Gary Siders Jr. Court records show that Elizabeth Siders was pregnant nearly every year from 2008 through 2025. She had children in 2008, 2009, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2016, 2017, 2019, 2020, and then twins, it appears, in 2022, 2024, and 2025.
And according to court record, nearly every single year from 2008 all the way through 2025. Children in 2008, 2009, 2011, 2013, 2014, 2016, 2017, 2019, 2020. And then what appears to be twins across 2024 and 2025. Read that again. Nearly 2 decades. Almost every year. And this is the part that's going to make your stomach turn a little. Law enforcement says the family moved from county to county and even spent time in Wisconsin.
Law enforcement said the Siders moved from county to county and even spent time in Wisconsin. And I've learned that Children's Services may have visited the family in one Ohio county, but then the Siders moved, I'm told, to keep the children from being taken away from them. The Siders, according to the sheriff, have lived in the house on Omer Street in Vinton County for the last 4 years.
There's reporting suggesting that Children's Services may have had contact with this family in at least one Ohio county before they relocated. Whether that move was connected to avoiding further contact with Child Services isn't confirmed. But the pattern is hard to ignore. Now here's where it gets interesting, because this story didn't stay contained to a courtroom. It spilled onto social media, and family members started talking loudly. Elizabeth's brother Jeremy posted online just after the arrests, saying his sister had, in his words, wrapped her life up due indoctrination.
Elizabeth's brother, Jeremy, posted on Facebook on June 30th, "My sister just wrapped her life up due to indoctrination. It is 100% real. 20 kids and younger than me. The math equals immature piece of you-know-what man involved. I met this dude a couple of months ago, shook my hand like a baby would, super soft hands, definitely never worked a day in his life. I should have took him out that night. I was thinking about it, but my sister, I was happy to see. Been 15 years. You lost touch with your family, followed another. Look what happened." Now, I reached out to Jeremy Russell, but at the time of this recording, I haven't heard back from him. On Sunday, Jeremy Russell then wrote, "Got a lot of Facebook investigators, LOL. You're in for a ride. I've been telling you all. My remorse? I don't care. I really don't. That's sad. I tried many times. Ask my ex. She knows. I was the one harassing. I love my sister. However, everyone knew about it. I told everyone. Welfare supporters to the maximum. So state knows something. I don't get it. Just leave me alone."
He described losing touch with her for 15 years. He also said, and I'm going to say this carefully because it hasn't been proven in any legal sense that everyone knew about it, his words. Not mine. That's a heavy claim. Because if it's true, even partially true, it means this wasn't hidden as well as people assume. It means somewhere along the way there were chances. Chances to ask a question. Chances to check in. Chances that, for whatever reason, didn't turn into action. But before I get to what that might mean, I want to slow down for a second. Because this next part is personal for me, and I think it needs to be said plainly. When you cover cases like this long enough, you start to notice something. It's never just one villain and one victim. It's usually a whole chain of people who saw pieces of the picture and didn't put it together, or didn't feel like it was their place to say something. And I'm not saying that to excuse anyone facing charges here. I'm saying it because if we only focus on the 4 people in that jail cell, we miss the bigger, harder question. The one about all of us. About what we do or don't do when something feels off in our own neighborhoods. Okay, let's keep going because there's more, and it complicates things even further. Another one of Elizabeth's brothers, Joey, pushed back hard against the narrative that the children were illiterate.
The oldest couldn't spell her name, but one of Elizabeth Sider's brothers is disputing that his oldest nieces are illiterate, even posting screen grabs from social media accounts attributed to them. Joey Russell posted on Facebook, "I thought my nieces couldn't read or write. These are messages between her and her ex-boyfriend. He says they had to break up because of her neighbor Mike. He sent proof of everything. The lies need to stop. The speculation needs to stop. Clearly the neighbors knew. Clearly she could read, write, and speak. We just want the damn truth. Praying day and night for my nieces and nephews."
Law enforcement had said the oldest child couldn't even spell her name. Joey posted screenshots he says are messages between his niece and her ex-boyfriend, arguing that clearly she could read And clearly she could write. He said, the lies need to stop. He said the neighbors knew. So now you've got one family member saying everyone knew, and law enforcement saying these kids couldn't function at a basic level. Both can't be fully true at the same time. Something doesn't add up. That's the breadcrumb we're left chasing. How were teenage girls allegedly kept in a locked, filthy room, also active on social media? Did they have phones, an iPad? Access nobody's accounted for yet? We don't know. Nobody's answered that yet. Then came the attorney, Dorian Ball, representing the grandfather, Gary Siders Sr., sat down for an interview and pushed back on almost everything the state has said publicly.
Your client, along with his family members, is facing, 16 felony counts, second-degree felonies of child endangering. It's been described as a really awful place where these children were being kept, a 12 by 12 room. The sheriff, I believe, said there were feces all around. There were flies on the kids. The sheriff said livestock are kept better than these children.
He pointed out that the current complaint has 16 charges, down from an original 17.
Well, I would say there's multiple responses. The first one, I do want to clarify for anyone who might be seeing this. They're currently facing a complaint with 16 charges, which is actually an amended complaint from an original complaint that was 17 charges. And that complaint, in the state of Ohio, you have the right to a grand jury proceeding whereby you have to present facts to a grand jury, and a grand jury will return an indictment if they think there's probable cause. So at this point, they're facing criminal charges in a complaint.
He argued that a complaint is not a conviction, and that the state still has to clear the bar of a grand jury before this ever reaches trial. And here's the part that stopped me. He said, flat out, that he believes the state's characterization is overblown.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, the state has provided what can only be described as a modicum of the evidence. We have gotten so little from the state at this point. As has been reported, we've already filed for discovery. We're asking for the state to provide it to us. I've had some minimal communications with the state, but from what I've seen, to be perfectly blunt, when I see a press conference where the state AG is making these hyperbolic, extravagant statements about what he saw, where the sheriff is talking about livestock, is just simply, it's beyond disingenuous, frankly. It appears to me, from what I understand, that these people are really just trying to criminalize poverty and an extremely impoverished family.
That being dirty, being unkempt isn't the same thing as meeting the legal threshold for second-degree felony child endangering. He said the state has provided what he called a modicum of evidence so far, and that as of the interview, discovery hadn't even been fully turned over to the defense. Now look, I'm not saying he's right. I'm not saying he's wrong either. That's not my job here, and honestly, it's not yours to decide from a video either. That's what the court process exists for. But I do think it's worth sitting with the fact that a licensed attorney, someone with access to at least some of the case file, is publicly disputing the picture that's been painted in press conferences. He also raised a concern that hit differently. He said his client, the grandfather, appeared in court in a wheelchair, seemed to have trouble hearing, and seemed to struggle understanding the judge.
So your client, Gary Siders Sr., we saw him when he was in court for his initial appearance, and he was in a wheelchair. Do you know anything about your client, about his physical state, his health, his mental state?
Frankly, I've seen what you've seen, which is I saw it appears that he has limited mobility. My understanding is that he had difficulty hearing. It also seemed that he had difficulty understanding the judge. So I have some of the same concerns that anyone else might have looking at a person whose competence might be in question.
He said one of his first jobs now is determining whether his client is even competent to stand trial. Think about that for a second. An elderly man, potentially struggling with basic comprehension, facing the same second-degree felony charges as the parents in this case. Where does responsibility actually sit when competency itself is in question? Nobody's answered that yet either. And then there's the part of this story that almost nobody is talking about at all. Buried underneath the child endangering charges is something else. Gary Siders Jr. is also facing 4 misdemeanor counts of public indecency, allegedly exposing himself in a way that could be seen by people outside the household on 4 separate occasions between May 23rd and May 31st.
While the parents and grandparents of the children are in jail facing serious felony charges, Gary Siders Jr. also faces 4 misdemeanor counts of public indecency. Court records state that Gary Siders Jr. did recklessly expose his private parts under circumstances in which his conduct was likely to be viewed by an affront of others who are in Gary Siders' physical proximity and who are not members of his household. Now, these alleged incidents happened 4 times between May 23rd and May 31st, according to court documents. Gary Jr. has pleaded not guilty to those charges and the child endangering charges.
Here's the question that should be keeping investigators up at night. Sheriff's deputies and state agents didn't show up because of misdemeanor indecent exposure charges. Everyone, including the defense attorneys, agrees that doesn't add up. So what was the actual basis for that search warrant? Because right now, those documents are sealed.
Do you know anything about this parallel investigation that brought Ohio BCI and the Sheriff's Department to the Siders' home?
Unfortunately, I don't. And as you sort of alluded to, it would seem pretty odd for a couple of misdemeanor counts of indecent exposure to generate the type of response that happened at this house. I would also be very interested to see what this search warrant said, what the basis for the search warrant was, how they were able to obtain such a search warrant, because I have a hard time believing, first of all, if all it was an arrest warrant, then none of this could have happened. So clearly it wasn't just those charges, because if it were, they would have a simple arrest warrant. They would ask for Mr. Siders Jr. to come out, and that would have been the end of it. So obviously there was more there. I'm sure that I and all of my other colleagues who are representing the co-defendants will all be very interested to see what the basis for the search warrant was.
It's only been described publicly as a parallel investigation. Nobody outside of law enforcement knows what that investigation is actually about. That's not a small detail. That's the whole reason deputies were standing at that door in the first place, and the public still doesn't have the full answer. And this is the part where I think we all need to just be honest with ourselves for a second. A lot of people online have already decided exactly what happened in that house. Some have called it a trafficking case, even though the county prosecutor specifically said publicly that this is not being investigated as trafficking.
You know, the state did, I will say this, to his credit, Prosecutor Archer, who is the county prosecutor down there, was very specific in saying that this was not an alleged trafficking case. But there's rumors that are flying everywhere about what was going on with these kids, what was happening to these children, whether there was other specific...
Others have decided the whole thing is overblown, a case of poverty being punished. Both of those positions are getting ahead of what's actually been proven so far. One family member summed it up in a post that I think is worth repeating because it doesn't pick a side, and honestly, that's rare these days. She said that even if Elizabeth was mentally conditioned into believing this life was normal, it still doesn't excuse dragging children through it. But she also said something else, that a lot of people failed those kids along the way, and that the pattern of not intervening, of not saying something when things feel wrong, is bigger than just this one family. That line stuck with me, because it's not really about whether you believe the parents or the grandparents or the family members defending them online. It's about whether somewhere in your own life you've seen something that felt off and told yourself it wasn't your business. Right now, all 4 members of this family remain in a regional jail in Southeast Ohio, each held on a $300,000 bond.
The 4 Siders family members remain in the regional jail in Southeast Ohio. Each is being held on a $300,000 bond. No word yet on whether more charges could be coming, but the prosecutor left open that possibility. All of the Siders have pleaded not guilty to these child endangering charges. So stay tuned. We'll keep an eye on this case for you.
All 4 have pleaded not guilty. The prosecutor hasn't ruled out additional charges. And the documents explaining what actually triggered this search warrant in the first place are still sealed.
The sheriff isn't commenting on what crime law enforcement was investigating when they went to the home on June 30th to execute that search warrant, and the documents related to it are sealed. It's only been referred to as a parallel investigation. But there are a lot of questions about how a family of 4 could keep children hidden away from the world, and why.
So here's where I leave it with you, because I genuinely want to know. If a family member of yours told you flat out that everyone knew something was wrong, would you believe them? Or do you think it's easier for all of us to say, we didn't see it coming? Put your honest answer in the comments, because I have a feeling the split on this one is going to surprise you.